punishing difficulty, epic boss fights, expansive world exploration, vague and complex lore, barefooted women. When you think of the Souls series, one of these ideas are bound to show up. All are definitely staples of the series, but in my mind, one stands above the rest: poison swamps. While From Software certainly didn't invent the concept of a poison level, the idea lives so free in Miyazaki's mind that he loses his mind, and when he regains his sanity, more and more poison swamps appear. This obsession has grown from dedicated levels to entire continents, so today I'm going to cross his obsession with my own. So I came up with a fun challenge for myself. I'm going to speedrun every game in the Souls series to see how fast I can get poisoned. I guess the only thing you all need to know is that time begins when I gain control of the player character, and time ends once I'm poisoned. It is also important to note I will only be going for the most basic form of poison from each game or their equivalent. We'll deal with that when we get to them. We'll go in order of release, so first up, Demon Souls. So the first important decision for every game starts before the run even begins. Each game has a stat that affects poison resistance, so the strategy will be to pick the class with the lowest relevant stat. In the case of Demon Souls, this would be Endurance, so we'd be picking the Royalty class. We begin the run by doing the biggest skip of the run, and we have to start in Boletaria as is custom in any Demon Souls playthrough. Unfortunately, there is no way we can get poisoned here, so we're going to have to run through the whole level and beat the boss. This involves dodging past enemies, hitting enemies out of the way, and rolling through explosive barrels. After bowling Boletarian style, we run across the dragon bridge and open up the door to the area boss, Phalanx. It is important to note we picked up firebombs and turpentine, so we'd have enough fire damage at the ready. I then use the Nexial binding and the power of PS5 loading times to get back to the front quickly. So for the boss, the strategy is to use the firebombs to dislodge the mini phalanxes, and then using turpentine to apply fire damage for some extra damage. After an acceptable fight, we close in on the end of the run quickly. We go back to the Nexus and speak to the Monumental to unlock the other areas and book it to the Valley of Defilement. Right at the beginning of the level, as you climb up, there's an enemy capable of poisoning you. A couple of hits and runs over with a time of 7 minutes and 21 seconds. Not a bad run, but one of the lengthier ones for sure. Next up, Dark Souls 1. Funny enough that resistance is relevant here, as we picked a sorcerer and firebombs as our gift. The gist is the same as many speedruns where we chuck bombs at Asylum, and after his death, we run to Oscar to pick up the Pilgrim Key, then use the Dark Sign to warp back to the second bonfire. After opening up the big door, we sprint for the Crow Taxi, and once in Lordran, you may have thought I would try to make it to Blighttown for some poison. However, there is a much quicker method. Let's head to the Aqueduct, and would you look at that, a rat, capable of poisoning us, in one hit no less, with a time of 2 minutes and 37 seconds. Let's head on to Dark Souls 2. Now we could just end the run here since this game is capable of giving you poison just by playing it, but I value my online reputation too much, so yeah, the neat thing here is that the timer begins before we even choose our class. Yeah, that's about as interesting as this run is gonna get, since this is gonna get wrapped up rather quickly. Speaking to the Golden Girls, we go with the Cleric because in a surprising twist, we actually want the least amount of adaptability as possible. So a quick jaunt through things betwixt, and after arriving in Majula, let's take the road with Benhart, and we find a nice secluded room with the Testicle Monster, and that's going to end the run with a time of 2 minutes and 39 seconds. Another relatively quick run. So let's follow that up with another quick run, Bloodborne. Before the run officially starts, we roll with the Noble Scion class, and after waking up in a strange bed, the run really begins, and depending on RNG, it'll end rather shortly. The main strategy here involves this wolf, by far the most infuriating part of this run. If you've ever seen a Bloodborne speedrun before, you may be aware that you can clip through a fence and get to the Forbidden Forest almost immediately. Unfortunately, this is so luck dependent that I'm kind of baffled because practicing this before recording, and the wolf was compliant almost every time. As soon as the cameras roll, he becomes a bit of a diva and has to make trouble for me. The strategy that had the most consistency was to run out into the courtyard and stand around here. Hopefully the wolf would then take a swipe at me, which I would dodge. Then I would move to around this area. The hope here was that the wolf would hopefully operate on my time and try something other than just standing around wondering how he can waste more time. If I were lucky, he would go for a grab attack. At this point, I then walk slowly over to the gate, and if the spacing is good enough, he'll continue with another grab. While contemplating whether or not to get a room, I eventually throw the wolf off of me, and I'm conveniently behind the gate. At this point, it's a race down the unnecessarily long ladders, and we take a dip into the first poison swamp of this video, and we clock in a time of 1 minute and 35 seconds. So we've got quite the marathon up next, so let's hit the ground running with Dark Souls 3. In an interesting twist, we start with the Assassin. While this class doesn't start with the lowest relevant stat, Vitality, it does start with a very useful spell, Spook. The main draw is that it'll be useful for several sections in the run. I choose Firebombs as the starting gift. Let's start with levels Dex Gundyr, and thankfully this fight can be scripted if you know the right way to do it. We start with 13 one-handed R1s, then after he goes to phase 2, follow up with 3 two-handed charged R2s, then finish off with a couple of R1s. After the fight, we book it to Firelink so we can teleport to the high wall. It's a normal run as you'd expect, but we also take a bit of a detour so we can pick up some lightning resin for later. It's the normal run you'd expect, but once we get past this area, we can use Spook to fall down the ladder and get to the courtyard. Then it's a dash to get to Emma so we can get the banner to use after the Vort fight. Speaking of which, we use the resin I mentioned earlier in this fight. The best strategy here is to dodge and hit his head if possible. During phase 2, we get a long time to get in some hits, and he goes down in no time. Now it's a mad dash for the finish. Honestly, at this point, it's just running through, and while the enemies can crowd in a rather annoying way, once we get to this ledge, we can use Spook to jump down to the elevator where Sigrid is, and then use this nifty looking drop to get down there faster. We squeeze by the Frost Knight and we're at our destination. It just so happens that these weird crow mages can cast Poison Mist. It's kind of annoying since a lot of these enemies want a sweet piece of that ass, but eventually we get the RNG we need, and that's the run. With this route, the best I could do is 9 minutes and 43 seconds, but technically it isn't the fastest. There is a glitch that can be used to skip for it, but I'm too lazy to actually learn it, so if you'd like to see a proper way to do it, I'll just drop a mention to everyone's favorite foot-related speedrunner, Minoan. Okay, on to Sekiro, the penultimate game in the speedrunning marathon. Won't be as long as Dark Souls 3, but can still be troublesome if I decided to play bad. After regaining my will to continue, I jump out and go straight to Kuro. The entire tutorial plays out, and after losing to Genny, we get our fake arm and we make our way to the first item we need, the Gachi Sugar. This allows us to become invisible and harder to detect from enemies. We need to use this so we can sneak up on the chained ogre and get a free death blow to shorten the fight. After dodging the smackdown enough times, we take him down, and after hopping through the next area, we drop down, turn around, and conveniently enough, a gecko will also drop down and offer his poison as we end the run with a 5 minute and 24 second run. Another shout out to Minoan for reminding me of this and saving me from being god-awful at Gyobu skip. Just wanted to mention this run could be even faster if I could perform the ogre skip, but that's too tough for a novice like myself, so let's move on to the last game in the gauntlet, Elden Ring. Remember, this is about poison, not scarlet rot. Alright, get that smut out of here. Same deal as before, where we want to pick the class with the lowest endurance, which influences poison resistance with extra steps, and it's important that we start with a stone sword key as our gift. The run begins with grabbing the finger and opening the first door and booking it to the Scion. but he's a bit scary, so I decided to book it off the nearest ledge. After awaking, I run to the door that needs a stone sword key. I enter said key and I leap off the ledge, and after a couple of seconds we end the shortest run with a time of 1 minute and 32 seconds. Alright, so that's the end of the run. Here's a recap of all the runs in order from quickest to longest. Some of the runs could be improved if I was better, but I'm not, so if you'd like to do it yourself, I'd love to see it. Otherwise, I hold the title I've always wanted of SoulsBorne Poison Speedrun Champion. Anyways, let me know if you liked the video and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. I really do like making these kinds of videos. I'm Mr. Meta. Thanks for watching.